Well, good morning and welcome to Business Wit's 30 Minutes to Better Business Results. We're here to spend a little bit of time with David Mack. We're gonna spend a little time walking through a couple of different principles that might help him advance his business. Um, the reason why we do this program is because today in today's climate, business environment, there are more small business owners, medium-sized business owners than ever before. The Great Recession pushed a lot of people out of their corporate jobs, and they've gone out and started new businesses. In fact, there's a study out that there's something like 53 million freelance workers out there in the marketplace today. And it's a great time in history for that because things like the internet take away geographic boundaries and consistencies, and there's all kinds of different ways to be efficient and market and get the word out about what we're trying to get done and trying to find clients. Um, a lot of these small businesses, though, you've got a good idea, good system, good product, good concept, but there may be some things that are just missing just a little bit. And hopefully, through this activity, through this 30 Minutes to Better Business Results Hangout, you'll get a couple of different ideas about how you might be able to advance your business further. So, with us today, we've got David Mack. David's the owner of Macksurance. And so, David, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the things that are going on with your organization today?
Well, I'm an insurance broker. I've been in the business 11 years, and we cover multiple lines of, insurance coverages. And, one of the biggest challenge right now is, with the healthcare reform, the Affordable Care Act, I would say the last 2 years, pretty much, we've been dealing, the last year or two, just reacting to some of the, law changes on how medical insurance is delivered to the client. And part of the reason why it's challenging is because the government doesn't really know what they're doing either. So as much as we try to be proactive, we don't find out afterwards until they put it out there that you kind of figure out how to actually navigate this new market. And so that's been very time consuming, and it's kind of pulled us away from some of the other things we do. I mentioned that law has to do with medical coverage, but we also cover life, long-term care, disability. So it's really taken our focus off a lot of the other segments that we also help clients with. So
in terms of in your business and your planning, you're probably doing a little 2015 goal setting planning. What are you trying to get accomplished? Where do you sit there, and where do you think some of the areas are that you'd like to work on and get better at over the next 6 or 12 months?
Well, that's just the whole thing, and between the hiring model is because of everything we're doing in working with clients, educating them, educating ourselves, waiting for the government to figure out what they really mean and how they're going to implement some of the things that are mandated by the law. It's really taken our focus and away from some of the other areas that we work with our clients. We pretty much, there's times a year we stop marketing those other segments of clients because we're just, we're out of time. We're spending all our time with, with the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. So that's where, with the hiring model, is can we be more efficient and still do everything we do and provide the services that we do to our clients while taking the extra, work that we have on the medical changes. But then with that, it's like, is there enough business to substantiate, hiring 2-3 more people? I don't know. It's and we just don't have that much time to think about it dealing with compliance right now.
So, in terms of this, should I hire somebody? I mean, these are classic business owner, small business owner challenges, right? How do I get it all done? As a sole proprietor, I mean, I'm the one and only person that can do it. And at some point, we start to sit there and say, well, maybe if I brought somebody on board that could take care of some different things, I could get a little bit more business. I could get a little bit more activity going. Is that part of your thought process there?
It is, and normally it's easier because I can actually focus and do some projections and really spend a lot of time with my client base and figure out where some of those numbers are, what the revenues can be. But right now we're just always behind because of all the changes in the medical market. and so it's really taken our focus off, and I just can't get a handle on the other areas for right now.
So having some other resource would give you the ability to handle it, and if you brought somebody in to be able to handle that, so you could focus on some of the other things, do you have a good idea or good understanding of the tasks and the activities that you would have someone perform for you?
Yeah, and I had an office manager, and she basically did a little of everything. It's not very specialized in one area, so it's a little of everything. And the nice thing was it kept the ball moving forward a little bit, but not really great in any one particular area. Um, so it was kind of just splitting all the things I do with another person, but not any one area really, really as well as I would like.
So finding the right person, what would be the strategy for that, and where could I find that person, and how I would go about hiring that person, might be a key component of what you're trying to accomplish here to satisfy your goals for 2015.
Yeah, one of my thoughts is maybe continue the office manager role, just as it's a mixture of customer service, account manager, and just admin, and maybe have a second person more on the sales side that's not involved with the admin and so forth, and actually do a little bit more of the prospecting and you know moving our existing clients forward and helping understand what their needs are. A little bit more consultative with existing clients.
Is that a marketing role or a sales role or a combination of both?
Yeah, kind of a marketing sales role. I mean, when it comes to the admin functions, the support functions, and there's enough work for two people, but maybe just talking it through, maybe it does require a third person who's more specialized, who's pulled away from the admin functions, the paperwork, and it's actually doing more of the sales calls.
And so, are you comfortable that you know the style of person and the behaviors and the specific tasks that you're looking for from this person, or are you still at the place where you're designing and developing that kind of material?
For the that one, I would have to put some thought to. Just in, I'm sorry. For the sales, marketing role, it's definitely a new position. I never really had anyone dedicated to that only. So, for sure it'll be a little bit of a trial and error and see how it goes.
So I think what we'll do is I'll show you a little thing called the 4 stages of learning. I use this quite a bit with my clients, but it's really applicable to those places where we're really not an expert or not really fluent in a particular space and time, and how do we go about learning, and how do we go about getting to the next particular place? Because in this particular, it sounds to me as if that might apply in a variety of different ways, and understanding this topic and this practice, then we could talk about what are some of the action items that would allow us to advance along the learning curve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do, I do a lot of drawings on my flip chart. And in this particular case, we're going to talk about Abraham Maslow's 4 stages of learning. Okay? And Abraham Maslow, clinical psychologist back in the 60s, he's actually known more for the hierarchy of needs. And the hierarchy of needs is that sort of 5-stage component that starts with the base of that is food, clothing, and shelter. And ultimately, we have this thing called self-esteem that we're all trying to get at some particular point in time. What most people don't know is he was also one of the fathers of this, the 4 stages of learning. And you can Google this, and it'll show up in a lot of different places. But what we talk about, and I'm going to go ahead and write that here in case anybody's interested in looking that up. What we talk about is the learning curve, right? And it's definitely not a straight line, right? I get to use the little s for that. And at the starting point of the learning curve, in psychological terms, we talk about, unconscious incompetence, right? And at this place here, Um, the challenge we run into is we don't really know what we don't know. And it's going to take some additional outside stimulation for us to figure that out, right? And so some of the ways you might do that is you might talk to somebody like me, or you could go on the internet and do some research and do some studying, or you could read a book or video, any number of different ways um, to move you on. But it's not something that's going to spontaneously just jump up and say, look, oh, this is how it works, right? Once you do learn something, you learn an idea or a system, right? Then we could come immediately, we transition to the next level, right? And the next level is called conscious incompetence, right? And in this particular case, this means we know something exists, we know something about it, so now you've found the book, or you've found the video, or you've done some research, you've talked to somebody, you know something out there exists that might be able to help you with your next step, but you don't know how to do it. And so now you're going to have to learn how to do it. And once you've studied it, or you've read the book, or you've got the lesson, whatever that activity is, you move to a level called conscious competence, right? So now this means you know how to do it, right? You might not be very good at it. Now, the story I use here is, did you ever learn to drive a manual transmission car?
Sure.
How did that first week go?
It was rough. It was a lot of pressure.
Yeah, because we knew that you push the clutch in, you shift, hit the gas, let the clutch out, but it took some practice to get better at it, right? And that first week we stall the car out. Hopefully we don't crash into anything, but there's a lot of different things that we learn. And the key is we knew how to do it. We just weren't very good at it. And the next steps is obviously we practice. And with practice, right, we also need some feedback. Right? And with the car example, when you stall it out, I mean, it's very obvious that you've done it incorrectly, so then you can make some adjustments to get better and become more effective and more efficient at driving that particular car, driving a manual transmission. And after a week or so, you pretty well got it, unless you're driving on a hill up in San Francisco or something. That might take a little more time. But once with practice and feedback, we're able to move to the top level, and the top level is called unconscious competency. So in which case, you're not really having to think about it too much anymore, right? So we take this model, this learning model, right, and we say, where are you, right? You're at the point now where you're saying, listen, I'm really thinking that maybe a sales and marketing person might be a good idea, but I'm not exactly certain what I would have that person do, and maybe not even certain where I might find that person, right?
All right.
So if you think about it, and you're looking at that, where are some of the areas that you might consider going to move yourself from this unconscious competence, or maybe you're here in this particular area because you kind of know this is the place. Where are you going to go learn, or how are you going to learn, more about how do you want this person to work, how do you want this person to behave and perform for your company, and where you might find that person.
Right.
But where would you go? What are your options?
Obviously you can do, some of the boards out there, where you can pull down resume or put up job postings. Other ones, one that has worked well is just, asking for, referrals from colleagues and different things, especially colleagues that are in my industry. They kind of know basically what some of the expectations are. And I feel comfortable with that just because, a lot of times there are people that, my circle of friends or business colleagues know those people personally or to some degree professionally. So I feel kind of comfortable with that. But the other thing obviously are the job postings, and you get a lot of different resumes and a lot of prospects through that.
So that's sort of a little bit of how I might find this person, but in terms of what you want this person to do and act and operate and perform, do you have a job description or a process or anything that would explain to this person how you want them to do it for you?
Yeah, so typically I would give them a task, or even a job description, during the interview process, and especially if I do hire them, I will detail out, exactly what their job duties are and the expectations, maybe, especially in the sales position, sales and marketing, definitely would need to set, maybe daily or weekly goals or monthly goals, because it's through that to justify that position. And then, the last thing is, what I find is whenever hiring someone new, I do have to spend quite a bit of time with them in the first few weeks, just working with them, literally right next to them, to just make sure, between the on-the-job training and kind of observing the results of their work. So a lot of hands-on training.
You're going to have to train them in some fashion. Now, would you wait until they were hired before you made out the job description, or do you already have that in place today?
In place, I would. So obviously, this is a new position I'm pondering. But when I think about like the office manager position, it was pretty much detailed out, written out what the expectations are, and I just think it really makes it a lot clearer and at least creates a form of accountability. If things aren't done, expectations are set up front.
So you have that for the office manager, but is that something you need to do for the sales and marketing position?
Yeah, and actually, that would, besides helping the position, it'll actually help me formulate or at least visualize exactly what this role is, to accomplish. So it'll be a good tool for me to write it out myself, to formulate what this position and the expectations of it are. And through that, I could probably set goals. Once I detail out the job duties, I could probably use that to set goals for the position.
So, I mean, you could sit down and just kind of think about through it and try to work your way through it all the way through it, or is there a resource or a place you could go that would help you, get these duties and details a little bit faster and quicker?
Yeah, just off the top of my head, I mean, I do have some colleagues, maybe not exactly the same lines of coverage I do, but same model, same delivery system. I could probably, sit down with them. These are friends and colleagues. I could probably sit down with them and find out what's worked for them and what hasn't. And,
Where could you get some information on the internet? I mean, that's everybody's favorite tool these days.
Yeah, I probably could. I guess I would just need to make sure I find something that's, closer to my industry.
I mean, you could Google job descriptions, insurance industry, sales and marketing job descriptions, and you might get a whole bunch of information out there that different people have done from a job description standpoint, that you could then pick and choose from to help build your job description. What you think is the thing you really want to have done.
Right. I could probably look at other people's job posting for those positions and kind of see what they're looking for.
Right.
And what some of the industry expectations are.
So this job description thing, there's a lot of different resources we can go to, and you've got some friends, and you've got the internet, and wanted to go to the library, you could probably get a bunch of different things. I want to add something that most people forget, right? And so, what is the behaviors and attitudes that you're looking for from this particular person? Their attitudes and how they go about their business and run those tasks generally make a big difference.
Yeah. Some of the things I probably look for, I mean, and that's really hard to tell. It's been the ongoing issue over the years. I have had people, agents, and so forth, is, obviously we want positive attitude, but the one thing that's really hard to measure is work ethic. I've seen some of the best resumes out there, but you can't find out, what type of work ethic they really have. And, it's easy to say, oh, I want someone that works hard. That's been a little bit elusive until you get them, in there and working. Can you really see what their work ethic is?
Well, help me understand what you think work hard means.
Well, probably maybe I'll start, sure. And maybe one of the things I know it isn't is, I've had people where, they're in between probably every 15 minutes is surfing the internet, and they just take their leisure time getting the job done. Whereas, I look at it either from my personal perspective or other people I have work for me, is they just take their sweet time to get a simple task done. And nothing frustrates me more when I'm paying someone hourly and they're taking 3 to 4 times as long to get a simple task done. So
That is amazingly frustrating, and one that business owners address and face every day. Well, so what if you took a look at it from a different approach and you said, listen, I'm not too concerned, about the day. What I'm really concerned about is the results, right? What are you delivering to me on a daily basis, right? Like you said, if I could get these results every day, it really wouldn't matter to me if you were surfing the internet or doing something else. These results are worth the amount of money that I'm spending.
sure.
Results, what you look for from this person, that you would know that they're giving you value for your investment, because that's really what you're doing, is you're investing some dollars in order to get some labor and some resources done. And as long as they give you a fair amount of labor and resources, you become a little bit less concerned, right? As long as you're getting the details, the results that you're looking for. So what are some of the results that you might want? And could you sit down and quantify those results that would tell you this is what I need, what I want, and as long as I get this, I'm happy to invest this much money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a good example would be, the office manager, account manager. I've given her, a task. Here's a spreadsheet of all the clients that, I need you to get through today and update, all this information. So you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, I probably wouldn't really, whether she's, God, you should take some breaks and relax a little bit here and there. But as long as that spreadsheet I give her is completely done, top to bottom, all the clients are contacted, you're absolutely right. I really wouldn't care what happens in between that. As long as at the end of the day that's done. Maybe if I have 15 applications, I need all these processed and submitted today. As long as those are completed, I'm a happy person.
So is 15 applications a good number? I don't know this because this is your business, but I mean, if somebody could do 15 applications a day, would that be equivalent to 8 hours work, equivalent to an investment on your behalf, or is it 15 applications? I mean, can we actually come up with some different numbers, different metrics that say this is it? If you can do this, I'm satisfied with my investment.
Yeah, definitely in some areas I can, and I look in perspective of, let's say it's 15 applications. Between other things that I have to do, I wouldn't have gotten it done myself. And to me, that's value. Absolutely, I would pay. I would absolutely pay for that. You know, so for sure, in different areas, I can definitely qualify it.
So establishing the tasks that you want them to do, but then also what we call the metrics, right? What is the performance that I'm expecting, right, from this type of position, that makes it a valuable trade for me to take money out of my pocket and put in yours because I'm getting this in return. So when you do your job description, right, and we've talked about how you might find out what all those things are, then we could also sit there and say, okay, listen, so what's the quantity, right? What's the quality is another key component, right? Just because you did 15 applications but you did them incorrectly, that wouldn't be it, right? So we would talk about sort of maybe even an error rate that's acceptable, right? We don't expect 100% perfection; it's not possible, but maybe it's in the 90s. And then we would talk about the volume of work that's going to be necessary. Right? And so that would be pretty clear, and then we could actually measure, the performance of that particular person. So
Yeah, no, absolutely.
so once you've got a list of the different tasks, would you be able to then identify, the performance tasks, the performance needs, right, of that position, so that again we're no longer worried about it, because I don't really want to watch somebody work, right? I just want the work to be done. If I have to
Right.
watch them, then I can't do the things I need to do. So and so then at the end of the day or at the end of the week or whatever else, I could basically look back and say, hey, the performance is good or it's not good, and then we could coach on how to get it better.
Right.
But if we had this stuff in advance, when we go to market, right? Because when you hire an employer, you're going to market for a different thing, right? You're selling your company to an employee, which is another animal that we could talk about another time. But when we go to market, and we go what we call fishing in some ways, right? We need to know what we're fishing for. So we're fishing for somebody that can do this stuff and can do this volume of stuff.
Right.
And the more we know in advance, the more likely it is that we're going to attract the candidate or candidates that could fit that particular model.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're willing to do some training, right? You're not expecting to be somebody to be 100% up to speed on day one.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But when they are, it's great.
Well, if you can find that person, and typically, in the working world, we find that person because they're better and they're more expensive, and then you have to take a look at your budget and how much time you're willing to train them to come in and do it, or you need somebody that can do all this stuff right now. But if we have this job description and we have these metrics, then we might be able to do a better job of marketing for this type of position.
Right.
Even if we're going to referrals and friends and other places, or maybe we're doing job postings, but we're doing a better job of what we really want, what we really need, right? And then we probably do a little better job from an interview standpoint.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
What about some of the is the ability to think for themselves?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Okay, so one of the things I hear all the time is that I don't have any. My guys don't think for themselves, right? They can't figure it out for themselves. They can do steps 1 to 10 in that order every single time, and that's fine. But if anytime they get outside of that box, they get stuck and they end up running to me for problems. And the reality is, nothing's perfect. Nothing ever will be perfect. There's always going to be issues. And gosh, if they could figure those issues out without having to come to me, that would be pretty good.
Right.
So how would you describe that in your job description? Because that's an attitude, right? The ability to think and figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, and that's definitely nice because I've seen different aspects of that. You can ask for it on a resume. You can ask for it in an interview. Someone who can manage themselves and think on their own. But what I found in interviews is, of course, they'll tell you they can. They always say they can. And I've seen that go both ways, and it's quite an interesting balance, an interesting area, because I've had people where they can think on their own or they try to, but in that process they make the wrong decisions, because they're getting the areas that they're not familiar with, but I do like the initiative. They do take control and they make the decision on the spot and just get the job done. But unfortunately, sometimes because it exceeds their area of expertise, it gets done incorrectly. So as much as I like the initiative, I think it's great, but people get themselves in trouble. And then on the other end, you have people that absolutely cannot think on their own and constantly come back to you, which kills you too, because you wonder what did I hire you for. So it's a delicate balance to find it right in the middle, where they can do some of the things on their own, but when it gets beyond their ability or area of knowledge, that they ask for help.
Well, and that's the balance for all of us, right? So one of the things that we try to do when we give them some lead, right, to where you want them to go figure it out for themselves. What types of things, or could you identify those types of tasks and areas that maybe don't have giant consequences for a mistake, to where they could go learn to figure it out on their own?
Yeah, maybe one of the example is, the office manager was handling, my constant contact account, and that was actually one area where I didn't have the time to invest. It was something new to me also, so I didn't have a lot of time to invest in getting good at it, and that was something where it was worthwhile sending her out to, different classes that I found on constant contact, or maybe webinars, and actually invested the extra, invested in my person to learn how to do it, because I didn't have the time to deal with it.
So you gave her some additional training opportunities?
Right, and the latitude to just own the task and take care of it. The end goal is I need these, newsletter communication go out. I don't have time to figure it out, and pretty much I'm giving them the ability to do whatever it takes to get the job done. and just make the decisions.
So, is there, if you were in an interview situation and you were trying to find out if somebody had the willpower or the willingness to go try things, because some people get kind of stuck and are afraid of making a mistake and they won't even go down that path.
Right.
What's a question or two that you could ask somebody to give you some insight into how they might react to that type of a situation?
I would propose the same situation and ask them. One thought is maybe ask them if they've dealt with something similar to that, where they were tasked with something that maybe they had to go out and learn for the company, and own that task. And give me an example of something that you've done in the past that similar to, or maybe demonstrate that.
Yeah, so give me an example of the last time that you had to go learn something and figure it out for yourself, right? And give me an idea of the results and the process and everything else. So we would find some insight into that particular person that's not going to show up on the resume, right? And it's not covered in your job description. It's not really covered in the metrics, right? So we have to ask these kinds of questions. And so you might be able to come up when it's time for that interview process with a few questions that might help you identify how they might react and respond and operate under different scenarios.
Yeah, no, that would be a good one.
So you could, and on the bottom left here, I'm kind of writing down some things here, and I'm just going to put questions right here. These are questions about behavior, right? Because again, they're not on the resume, right? And then you could certainly check references and ask other people how this person performed in those kind. You could take these same questions and go to their references and things like that, right? So
Right.
you've got a thing where you could do put together a good job description. You've got a variety of different ways to go with that. We've got metrics that might help us address the work ethic issue, because it's a big issue, right? It's a big issue that every business owner has. And then we might figure out what are some of the questions that I want that help support the behaviors that I'm looking for in this particular case, right? And so we want behaviors to say, under this scenario, you'll go do it and figure it out and come back. But maybe under this scenario, this is the place where the consequences are too great, and this is where you need to come back to me. So we could actually develop some parameters that explain to them what behaviors we're expecting, and then we can ask questions to find out if they have those behaviors or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think the way they explain it is very telling, whether it's true or not. You can tell when someone is making something up and making it sound better than it is.
Well, you certainly can, and in communication, there's body language, there's the tone of voice, and again, you can also go check references. So before we leave, I'm going to go over one other thing for you, because I think this is kind of valuable, and it has to do with what we call the mistakes curve. I'm going to flip this up, and this is actually a story that I heard from Brian Tracy, and he's got really good stories, right? But there's a book that was written by Ernest Hemingway back in the 20s called Death in the Afternoon, and it's about bullfighting. Now, when I first heard this, I'm like, I don't understand how bullfighting fits into this. But understanding how the bullfighting business works, back in the 20s, what happened is there's 6 bulls, and the big ring and everything, 6 bulls and 3 bullfighters, and each bullfighter would have to fight 2 bulls, right? And what they did is that they had to set it up so that with a bunch of distractions inside the ring, so that the bull got distracted enough to where the bullfighter had an advantage and could stick him with enough swords to kill it. Right, and one of the ways they managed that is they took the bulls, right, and they kept them sequestered from birth, so they never saw any of this kind of stuff. And the first time they entered the ring was the first time they saw any of these distractions. There's people, there's horses, there's obviously the matador, and they built a system that would, provided the matador knew what he was doing, give him enough time, and a strategy would give him enough time to where he could then kill the bull before he got gored, right? And then it became a game with the matador as to how close could he get, but he knew kind of the reactions and the reactions of the bull. How close could he get? Because the closer the horns came to the matador, the higher his scores and the higher his approval rating with the crowd. But one day there was a bull that actually learned a heck of a lot faster. They followed the same model, but this bull could learn faster and learn faster than any of the other bulls had ever been seen, right? And so it didn't get as distracted. It figured out where the danger was earlier and faster. And it was able to go and gore that first matador. So in those days, when the first matador got injured, they would take him out, and then the second matador would come in and try to finish off that bull. Well, by then, the bull's even smarter, right? So he goes and gets the next guy, and then the third matador really doesn't want to get in the ring at all. And actually, this particular bull, they put out to pasture as opposed to killing it and distributing the meat for food to the community. So we're talking about learning and learning faster, and what that process is. This kind of dovetails in with the 4 stages of learning. But what we know when it comes to learning, right, and this is something that you'll relate to pretty well, the curve has to do with time, right? How much time do we have? And the volume, right? And in this particular case, because it's the mistakes curve, right, we're looking at the volume of mistakes. And anytime we learn something new, we make more mistakes, right? And this is like going back to the manual transmission car. In the beginning, you did it wrong a bunch of times, right? So we get a very broad section of mistakes in the beginning for anything that new that we learn. And the complexity obviously adds to the number of mistakes. But over time, right, we learn from our mistakes because trial and error is the oldest learning tool in the history of mankind. Over time, we get a little bit better, right, until we get to some level of proficiency. So this is the learning curve. And so when you bring a new person on board, we don't expect them to be perfect right away. There's systems, processes, people, all kinds of things they have to do. But what we do have to have them do is we have to be able to have them learn from their mistakes, right? So they get a little better. And we become very careful. We don't allow them to make mistakes. We don't put them into positions that they can make mistakes on, big consequential issues where it costs a lot of time or a lot of money or a lot of safety issues or something like that. So what we have them learn, we guide them. But in areas where the consequences aren't so high, right, we can give them opportunities to learn and grow, because if they make a mistake, not the end of the world, we can get past it. They learn from it, and they'll get a little bit better. Well, the thing that we notice every now and then with somebody is that, as long as they're learning and getting better, this curve is going to happen. It's a natural evolution of learning. But we have some people out there that don't necessarily learn from their mistakes. They make the same mistake again and again and again and again, right? And I'm certain we've all experienced that. And so what happens then is we get a curve that looks like this, right? Now, some people will say, hey, it's a process problem, it doesn't work, da-da-da-da-da-da. But when you see this behavior happening, it's not a process problem. This is a learning process problem. This is a problem. This person has a problem learning. And guess what? As a business owner, does this curve ever get where you want to go?
No.
No, never, ever, 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 right? And so when we run into people that are like this, we have to say, okay, we have a learning problem. We have to talk. We have to teach them something different. We have to teach them a little bit more about the learning process than about the process for processing an application or something that, or whatever that particular activity is. And so what we have to do is we have to be on the business owner has to be on the lookout for this kind of behavior, because if you see this behavior, then you will never get where you want to go. So now there's a little different way to go about it when this stuff happens, because people make mistakes and they say, well, I did that, but tomorrow they did it again, and the next day they did it again, and we say, hey, stop, right? This isn't about the system and the process. It's about you learning how to get better with each particular opportunity. The other part of the curve that's pretty interesting, there's another one up here, right? And this one here is time and volume, same as below, right? But we call this the good decisions curve, right? And you talked about sometimes they make bad decisions, right? And again, the same thing happens, right? When we first learn something, how many good decisions do we make? Not very many, right? So in the beginning, right, at the beginning of time when we get started, we don't expect anybody to make a lot of good decisions because it's brand new. Okay? And this is why we have to manage the consequences that are potential for them. But what happens is over time, right, we get the inverse curve for good decisions. Over time, we try to get better at making decisions. So let's go back to this model and we say, okay, listen, so if we have a learning problem, right, or if we want to speed this up, we want to spend less time, right, we want to make this curve smaller, what are the kinds of things we can do?
That's a question?
That's a question, yes.
Besides, well, I mean, see, that's where I spend a lot of time on, like the hands-on training and different things, but again, it's very time consuming. It's a very big investment on my part because pretty much everything I do stops. But maybe it's a little bit too much of a micromanagement. But literally sitting next to someone and working through the task with them for the first day, first week, whatever it is, seems to help and shorten that curve.
So what are some of the other things that they could do that would shorten the curve that did involve you?
It's I don't know if it's efficient, but just bring me the result of the work periodically and having me check it real quick.
Well, in your example with Constant Contact, you sent them to training with somebody else.
Right, right.
That's another option, right? Getting training from somewhere else, right? Where else can you get training? So you can go to a class, right?
Sure.
College class, you can go to a seminar, you can go to a workshop, you can read a book, you can watch a video. So you could figure out what are all the other training, because we might want to help this person and see just how well they can be self-taught, right? Because the more self-taught they can be accurately, and you test to make and measure it to make sure that's accurate, that's time that doesn't demand your own particular time, right? Your specific time. And then you can manage the results, right, and see whether they're getting it or not, and provide some help on an occasional basis. So they end up becoming much more self-taught. And today there's online videos. I mean, if you go to YouTube, I mean, there's, I don't know, I have no idea how many videos are there on YouTube.
Millions. Sure, I agree.
Billions, different ways to do it. So you can kind of take this and apply. So once you've brought this new person on board, so ideally, who do we want? What are the attitudes? What are the behaviors, et cetera, that we want? And once they come on board, ramp them up through this curve as quickly as possible. And how do I make sure that this isn't happening, right? Because if we're going through the natural progression, people are going to make mistakes. That's life.
Right.
Now, some people make them are smarter, like the bull, right? And so if we're looking for that type of behavior, that might be something that we interview for, and we can maybe do some assessments or some behavior style questions that allow us to understand that a little bit better. But understanding what that speed of learning happens to be, right? And knowing that they're still going to make mistakes, and as long as they learn from their mistakes, they're going to get to this proficiency level, and then you just have to decide how much time am I going to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so we spent our half an hour here, and we covered the 4 stages of learning, and we covered this little mistakes curve and good decisions. And now it's your turn, right? What are the 3 action items? What are the 3 key insights and the 3 key action items that you're going to take away from this activity today to help your business be better starting next week?
Yeah, one of the things is writing out the job description. I'm talking about, and I've been thinking about adding this other position, the sales and marketing role. So, what I can do is, number one, I can visualize it, actually write out what the job duties are, and then also quantify it, because when I quantify it, I can see how much revenue. I know what the close ratios are. I know how many calls it takes to produce so many whatever. So I can quantify the position as far as their goals, because I can see how I can pay for or justify that position by quantifying it. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, in developing both those is maybe do a little research. Either speak with some of my colleagues or look on the internet about in those positions what are the expectations, because there might be duties that I can hand off into those positions that I didn't think about. So if I read the job descriptions for those positions by other employers, maybe it can give me some additional ideas too. So those would be 3 things.
I think that's a great start. And how much time, with some energy and time on your behalf, can you allocate to those activities over the next week or so?
Probably I can at least do a couple 2-3 hours of it.
Okay, and so 2 or 3 hours would advance you down the path to defining this role, this position. Where do you want to go with it? The other thing is, when you talk about time and you talk about your expectations, metrics, how often can they get stuff done, right? We know that they're going to start at this beginning stage, and there's going to be a little bit of time for them to ramp up, and you could say, hey, listen, I want you to be able to process X thing within 2 months. You need to be smart enough, good enough, high enough quality that you can process X things in a day, right? And then you can measure their progress as to how they're doing, right? If they're getting
Right.
closer and closer, you feel pretty good.
Right.
But if it's stuck in this box, then we're not feeling too good, right? And so we're going to measure pretty frequently early on, and then we can extend the measurements, maybe daily in the beginning, and then we extend the measurements to weekly or even monthly down the road, because you know that they've got a degree of proficiency that allows them to perform pretty consistently.
Right.
All right. So you got 3 hours to allocate to these action items sometime next week. And how are you going to hold yourself accountable for that?
I'll put it on my to-do list, and hopefully it's checked off.
Well, put it on your to-do list, and one of the keys, and I tell people this all the time, is that you actually want to take this and put it on your calendar and allocate some time. Because one of the main reasons why people don't get stuff done, even though they said they wanted to get it done, is because they ran out of time. They didn't actually allocate some time with it. Something else came in and took that spot. And for you, you can talk about priorities and what's more important and what's not important, but if you get it on your calendar, and the odds are very likely that you're going to be able to make some progress in that particular area when you've established the time for it. Even if something comes in and says this something's more important, then you can move it to somewhere else on your calendar. At least it doesn't get lost. You don't get to the end of the day or the end of the week and say, darn, I didn't get that done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dave, I really appreciate your time today. I hope it was valuable. And I just want to tell the audience, viewers that we have that are going to look at these videos, if you'd like to be a part of this, if you'd like to be on this program, if you'll just go ahead and send me an email or give me a call, reach out to BusinessWit. We're at www.businesswit.com, and in there's a contact form. You can request to be a participant, or you can send us some notes and conversations about what it is that you're trying to get accomplished, and together and have a conversation and see if we can't come up with some things. Dave, once again, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That really helped. I liked it.
All right, Dave. Thanks again, bud. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.